So today what we're going to do is work on the scenario-based questions in Power BI. All right. So last time was a little easier because it was more on conceptual questions, and what you had to do was, if I asked you a question, you had to tell me, your thoughts or your understanding on a particular topic. Today, I'm going to give you a scenario, a business question. I'm going to tell you what is going to be in the table, the columns, and I'll tell you what I want from the table. So based on that, you have to tell me, if not the DAX completely, you need to tell me which DAX functions would be utilized to work on the same. Make sense? Clear to everyone? Yes? So let's do the first one as an understanding to all of you also. So for example, you are creating a report that needs to compare the sales data from the current month to the same month of previous year, right? So for example, if I'm doing April 2024, so April 2023, so let's say we have a sales table in which I've got a date and I've got a revenue column. So what DAX formula would you use in order to create a column, or it can be a column, it can be a measure that will help you to find the revenue of the previous year? Okay. So which DAX functions would you utilize for this?
Previous month.
Previous month. And what would you put previous month inside another function? Because previous month is just going to give you a date out.
Calculate and
Calculate.
then the total sales and then the
Very
previous
good.
month.
Very good. So that is exactly the solution. Calculate function, inside calculate function, I'm saying sum of revenue, since I did not mention any measures over here. So sum of revenue and same period last year. No, it won't be previous month. It will be same period last year. Previous month would be April, March. But this is same period last year. So you'll be using same period last year over here to get the output. Is it clear to everyone how these questions are going to be framed? Ujjaini, Archana?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So these kind of questions can come, like for example, when you're giving Zoom meeting interviews. So where they want to understand your knowledge of DAX, but they don't want you to give anything as a case study on which you're working and turning it in. So even though, like I said, you might not be able to draft the entire formula because you don't have the computers, but at least you should be able to tell which DAX functions will be utilized in it. Right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. In a receivable table, so this is a new table, you have an invoice date and the date and the current date. So invoice date is there when the invoice went out, current date is there, let's say today's date. How can you use a DAX formula to categorize the invoices into what is the age of the invoice, 0 to 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 90 days, or over 90, based on how long the invoice has been outstanding? Okay, Jenny, do you want to take a shot at this one? Just have the invoice date and today's date, right? How will you find bins of aging of the invoicing?
We can use date diff.
You can use date diff to find the age. Very good. Next step.
And then we can use if and and.
Very good. You can use the if function over here. Absolutely correct. So that's what it is over here. So we will use, you can use nested if, you can use switch. And over here, we are going to use date diff and find out the difference between the dates. If it's less than equal to 30, then one category, second category, third category, over 90 days, and that's it. Very good. All right. Archana, next question is to you. You have a sales table with a lot of columns, but some rows have missing values in customer ID column. Customer ID column is there. Who bought? is given, how would you create a calculated column that indicates unknown if the customer ID is missing or blank, and known if the customer ID is given? So I've got a sales table in which there's a column called customer ID. There are few cells which are missing in it. So I want to create a column of known or unknown. Known if the customer ID is given, and unknown if the customer ID is not given. How would you create it? Anupama?
Yes. So we can use if, and if the customer ID is equals to blank, then we
Yeah.
will write unknown. Otherwise, we will write known.
Okay, I think Archana was trying to talk, but I'm not able to hear you, Archana. So Archana, no, I was not able to see. But Anupama, how will you check whether it's blank or not? Which function would you use for that? Or what logical test? Equal to double
So
quotes?
equals to double quote will
Correct. So
work.
this absolutely. So this question is also related to the questions condition. So if this condition is matching, I want an output. If some other condition is not matching, then some other output. So do I need a single if or a nested if for this?
Single if.
Single if can do with my work, or we can use a function of is blank, right? There's a function is blank, and we can put it inside if. If customer ID is blank, then unknown, otherwise known will come. All right, question number 4. In an employee table, we have a column of hire date and termination date. So when an employee was hired, when the employee was terminated. Now we need to calculate a column to find out the employee status, to show active if the termination date is blank, and terminated otherwise, which that's active if the termination date is blank or terminated. So hire date is given, termination date is given, you have to create a new column of active or terminated. This should be easy. Okay. Ujjani.
Ma'am, we can again use is blank for the
Correct.
terminated, and we have to use a double condition if, like two ifs. So if terminated date, if is blank terminated date, then
Correct.
we get it term active, and then or else terminated.
Terminated. Absolutely. This was a very easy one. Okay. Your warehouse table tracks the quantity of items in stock. So stock quantity it has, and a minimum required quantity column is there. So it's like a warehouse table where there may be products. For each product, what is my stock in hand and what is the minimum quantity I should maintain in my inventory, right? So how would you show the percentage of stock quantity relative to minimum quantity required? So for example, I have a stock quantity of 100. Minimum that I required is 200, right? So it is, I only have 50% in hand, correct? So how would you show that? Um, Archana, can you try to type in the chat window if your mic is not working? I think you've turned on your mic, but I still can't hear you. That's okay. You can write it in the chat window also. And remember, when you're giving me the answer, think about error handling part as well. What I mean is, what if the minimum required quantity is 0? Then in my tables, I should not get an error. So your answer should consist of error handling technique as well, or a function which can do error handling for you. Which function would we use? Very good. Divide. Absolutely correct. We will use the function of divide. Why we are going to use divide? Because divide has inbuilt error handling into it. Whenever the denominator is 0, it will not throw an error at us. Okay, let's do scenario number 6. Anupama, if you want to analyze the data from transaction table, but only include transactions that occur in the last 30 days and were over 500, which combination of DAX function would you use to create a measure that finds the sum of such transactions? So a lot of information over here. There's a transaction table, dates are given, and amounts are given. So now what I want is, I want to find out sum of such transactions which happened in the last 30 days and were over 500.
So we will calculate sum of amount, and
Okay.
then the filter would be one is the amount should be greater than 500.
So filter function you're going to use, or you're using filter inside calculate?
Filter inside calculate.
Filter inside calculate. Okay. So sum of amount, and what about the last 30 days?
Last 30 days should be dates in period.
Dates in period. Very good. So you'll use dates in period.
Dates in period, then the name of the table, then comma minus 30 comma days.
Correct. So we will use calculate sum of transaction. We will use a filter function would be better, since why filter function is going to be better? If I'm doing something like this, like an AND function I can use, right? And I'm making the, I can use dates in period, right? And then I can put it in calculate directly. But if I'm doing in this fashion where I'm taking today's date and doing minus 30, and whenever your logical test is not as simple as putting a value over here, then we cannot use calculate alone. We'll have to use filter function inside it. So I've used AND function today and implemented both of them together. So if these both are met, then the data gets filtered, and on that filtered data, the transactions amount are calculated. Any questions so far? No?
For this question, last question, could we have used previous month? Because last
Not necessary. You might not be sitting at end of the month. For example, if I take today's date, right, and I want 30 days from today, because it says in the last 30 days, it doesn't specify it's a month. Hence, we cannot use a month functions over here. All right. All right. Question number 7. You have a sales table with a quantity and unit price. You need to apply a bulk discount where if the quantity sold is more than 100, then it's a 10%. And what should be the DAX that you would apply to find the final price after the discount? So if the quantity is more than 100, then there's a 10% discount. Otherwise, unit into quantity. Ujjaini?
okay. We need to make a variable we can do. And
You want to create a variable. Why? You're creating a column called final price.
okay, a column we have to make a final price. So do an if function, and we say quantity for the quantity column greater than 100. So if that is met, then we will comma, then 0.9 into quantity into unit price, comma,
Correct.
or else just quantity into
Quantity to unit. Correct. All right. Archana, your sales table lists sales transactions. You want to calculate the total sales amount only for the transactions where the sales unit were sold, more than 100 units were sold. Okay, so you have a table of sales and the transactions, but I only want to find the total sales amount where the transactions is for quantity more than 100 units. Which function will be used? Not use if over here because I am asking to find the total sales amount. So in the previous question it was okay because I asked for a column. Over here I'm asking for the total sales amount. So calculate, very good. In calculate we can do sum of sales amount, and as a condition inside calculate we can put units greater than 100. Correct? This is another way. We can use a sum x as well. But calculate, and I think this putting greater than 100 would be more than enough. Okay. It was not mentioned that we don't have sales amount. So if the sales amount was not given, I think I've written half the question. So in the sales table, let's say we only had unit sold and unit price. We don't have a column called sales amount. Correct? Then we will have to use a sum x function because I can't use a simple sum and sum x on a limited data because there is a condition involved. So I can't use calculate over here. If I had a sales column, then calculate and a condition of units greater than 100. But if your table does not have sales in it, right, then you will have to filter the data for units greater than 100 and give it to the sum x function. So filter is working as a table of sum x. So sum x is what? You give a table and then you give an expression that you want to work on. So table, we are putting a filter on it because we want to reduce the transactional data where units is greater than 100. And then what we are doing on it, we are multiplying units sold into the price. Making sense? So two different scenarios since the question did not clarify that. So that's why calculate is also fine. But in case sales column is not given, then this would be the right approach. I should change it over here. 1 second. All right. Number 9. You're working on a data set that includes information about customers' transactions. How would you create a measure? So it's a measure, it's not a column, to calculate the total number of unique customers who made a purchase in the last 30 days using DAX function in Power BI. You have a column of customer transactions. You have to create a measure because all I need is the number of unique customers. That's the output. But what am I supposed to count? I'm supposed to count where they have made purchase in the last 30 days.
So we can use calculate, and inside that distinct count of customer,
Mm.
and then comma, it will be basically the filtered of the whole table by last 30 days. So today minus 30.
So you want to use calculate and do count distinct on the customer ID and use filter function to filter out the data of the last purchase and then give the output. All right. Very good. Dates in period or the other one, both work. Both work. Both are correct. This would also do. Okay. Like I said, in the first example, I gave a filter. Over here, dates in period. So either way, we can swap it. No problem. Very good. Okay. The last question. We have a data set of employee information and their corresponding department. Now to create a measure, again, it's a measure to find the total number of employees in each department using the DAX function in Power BI. So there is a data set of employee information and the corresponding department. We have to create a measure for number of employees in each department. Ujjani,
Can we use the summarize function?
can we use the summarize function? Very good. We can use the summarize function for this case.
Yes.
And inside
summarize.
summarize, we will summarize based on the
employee department
and count the rows.
count the
Now,
rows.
some summarize function gives you a table,
Yes.
right?
We have to
So
give
in
a
order
table name.
to convert the table into a measure, because this question involves a measure of it. So you will have to again put it inside a count rows data, right? Because otherwise summarize gives you a table. So you can't return a table in a measure. Hence you will have to envelope it with a count rows. Count rows is just going to count the number of rows that are there. All right. All right. That's it. And I think you all did very well. And what I'm going to do is post some more questions like this with the solutions so that you can help yourself and prepare yourself for these scenario based interviews. So whenever you have these kind of interviews, it's not a bad idea to keep a paper and pen in front of you, kind of create the columns that will help you to think a little bit more and then come up with the DAX functions, right? So you may, like I said, in these interviews, they're not looking at the exact formulation that has to be there, but having a thought process of which DAX can be used at this point. Okay. Do you have any questions to me? No? All right. I think you guys have prepared very well for the Power BI and do some case studies. Wherever you need my help, let me know. All right. Okay. Thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.